Let's start with a Paltiel Shamaise. Reb Shalom Belzer, the first Belzerov, when he was a younger man, came to his Rebbe. I believe it was the Abderov, for the first time on Purim. And officially he had never met him, he knew nothing of him and so forth. He walked into the Bes Medrash, and there was apparently a talk about who would read the Megillah. And the Abderov said, this young man will read the Megillah. And he was brought over to the center of the shul and he read the Megillah. And after he finished the Megillah, his Rebbe turned around to him and said, younger man, du tell sehr interessante Meise. He said, young man, the story you just told is most interesting. Because when the Belzer Rebbe read the Megillah, he read Sanandish, a different story. And I believe they wished each other as Mashiach will come in, and when Mashiach comes, he'll read the Megillah for everybody. Like it says, V'doiver Sholem, L'chol Zari, Mashiach had come in, he'll read the Megillah to the whole of Klal Yisrael. The Rebbe once in a Fabrengen told the story of a Paltiel Guterid, and he says, when they tell the Maisef and a Paltiel Guterid, Chalm Zchala up, Ufun Shlof. It's a story, it's a beautiful story. There's a very interesting, similar story with the Mittel Rebbe, with the second Lubavitcher Rebbe. His father, the Alter Rebbe, was also a Balkede. And when the Alter Rebbe read the Torah, it was Mechuven Lamayla Lamata. The timing, the musical notes, the trop, and the diktuk was perfect. The Alter Rebbe would repeat a pasuk even if there was a shinui in the timing, even if there was a change in the trop, let alone in the diktuk. And the Baditcheverov, the Heilige Rabbi Yossi Baditchever, when he met Rabbi Mezhubezer, who was a big critic of the Alter Rebbe's, he expressed himself. I heard him read the Torah. Eres given kulei lamayla. He was all together in the heavens. And he didn't miss one crown down here. In other words, in spite of the fact that when Alter Rebbe read the Torah, he was completely in another world. You know, like it says in Rashi about Ararakein, Malamet Shalashina, down here the reading was perfect, was exact. And of course he was saying this in defense of the Alter Rebbe and so forth. So the Mittel Rebbe, the second Lubavitcher Rebbe, grew up hearing his father read the Megillah and the Torah and so forth. It happened once during his father's lifetime still that the Alter Rebbe was not around for whatever reason, or the Mittel Rebbe was not with his father, and somebody else read the Megillah. After the Megillah was read, the Mittel Rebbe went over to this person and told him that was such an incredible story. The story you just told, I never heard. So he said to the Mittel Rebbe, what are you talking about? You read the Megillah every year? He says, no, I never heard it. This version of the story I never heard. With the Alter Rebbe read the Megillah, he heard a completely different story, and under Sipur and Gans, a different story altogether. And there's a famous story about the Chassid by the name of Rab Zalman Zezmer, who became a Chabad Chassid because he witnessed another Chabad Chassid reading and listening to the Megillah. I think it was Rabbi Yosef Kolbe, Yosef Shklova, but I could be wrong. And he saw as it had be'emes find Haman. He read the Megillah, he really hated Haman. And he saw a person who hates Haman. He said, this is real, this is meaningful. But I want to tell you another story. Also about how a person was makur of Chassidus because of the Megillah. It was a Yid, a Bar Urian, a Talmud Chacham, a Ben Teira, who came to hear a Chassidus and Alter Rebbe, heard the Alter Rebbe say a Maimer. And the Alter Rebbe began the Maimer just the way the Maimer we're about to begin. It begins, where he quoted a pasuk, and he asked a question on the pasuk, and of course the pasuk is part of the story. And the Alter Rebbe initially asked the question about the heavens. In other words, he completely bypassed the Pshutei Shel Mikveh. You all know, I'm sure, that the Gemara says that every time it says HaMelech in the Megillah, HaMelech goes on the Eibishter, Malkei Shel Olam. And in Sifrei Kabbalah it says, in Chazal it says, that every time it says Achashverosh, it goes on HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the Eibishter, HaMelech Sha'achres Vereishis Shalait. Achashverosh means the end and the beginning is his. And of course, in the Mari Chassidus, they also explain that Achashverosh is Chosh Rosh, silence and speech, agan tzarichas, there's much to be said. But most people, when they tell Dvar Teira and Purim, first you tell the story as it happened physically, And then you extrapolate from there to more metaphysics. The Alter Rebbe's question was, vi kumt asus lamailo. Whatever the question was, how do you have horses in the heavens? Whatever his question was. And he was a Yid, full of Torah, who had never ever experienced a human being learn a pasuk in Tanakh and only hear the metaphysics, only hear the ruchnis, never hear the physical story altogether. And of course, this is especially significant in the Megilas Esther, in Halacha, and in Chazal, and in Chassidis. The Megilas Esther is not called a sefer. It's called an igeres. It's not called a book, it's called a letter. We hold it like a letter. There's halachas that have to do with a letter. And in the Mari Chassidus, they explain what's the difference between a sefer and an igeres. And most importantly, in the entire sefer of Megilas Esther, Hashem's name is never mentioned. Not once. So it reads like a story, a maaseh. Of course, in Chassidus, the lack of presence of Hashem's name in the book of Esther is because every single word is the Eibishter himself. The whole story is the Eibishter himself. But it appears to be einfach, ordinary, not so holy. But it's mikra, Chassidishe Parshah, it's one of the Chadal Sfarim, it's part of the scripture, it's part of the Tanakh. And as such, it's God's word, literally. Biksav, written, it's exact, it's precise. So when the Alter Rebbe would learn the Megilas Esther, he didn't first understand it at a pshat level and then extrapolate from there to a pnimius level. He from the outset heard the higher level. And here is such a maimed. The maimed we're about to learn is in kind, so to speak. Now I want to tell you that this is very, very obviously a pre-Peterburg maimed. I believe it's in Tav Kuf Nun Zayin, which is 2 years when the Alter Rebbe was arrested and liberated. And it sings like a pre-Peterburg maimed. We've had a number of Maimorim that we have learned here in vayeshiva.net in this series, which has been going on now by Hashem's help for over 2 years. And the truth of the matter is that a lot of people deserve thank yous for the reasons that these shurim exist. They don't happen from thin air. A Maimer from before Peterburg speaks straight to the heart. The mind element seems to be missing. In other words, you don't see the profundity, when in reality it's so profound that the profundity escapes you. It's beyond, so to speak. As I've told you, there are actually some instances where you can see the same Maimer, as the Alter Rebbe said it twice, once pre and once post Peterburg, and you can see the difference. This is a short little Maimer. In our printout, in our PDF, it's 63 lines, which is relatively speaking short. There are shorter Maimorim, but there certainly are longer ones. And to a great extent, it speaks straight to the heart. The Maimer has a beginning and an end and a body. The beginning and the end, of course, talk about Purim. The body of the Maimer talks about, technically, it's Yom Hazeh and Yom Hahu, Halayla Hazeh and Layla Hahu, 4 levels. The day that is revealed, the day which is concealed, the night that is concealed, the night that is revealed, 4 levels. And the Alter Rebbe explains some more than others, but these are 4 conditions which the Maimer will develop. And the Maimer really revolves around that. It's very clear that you have a beginning and an end and a biur, that's, so to speak, the body of the Maimer. And the beginning and the end is so concise, particularly the end, that it's almost like, there's the Maimer and then there's the little beginning and the little end. So let's start. Let's read the Maimer. And you'll see what I mean soon enough. Vatosef Esther. Esther continued. And she spoke before the king. She fell at his feet. And she cried, Chanin, and she pleaded, Loi, to him, lahav, to remove, Esra, as the evil of Haman Hagogi, of Haman, who was from Agog, and then he adds the words, Ves machshav de asher choshav, and the thoughts that he thought, ala Yehudim, on the Jewish people. Now forgive me for going backwards. Haman is dead at this point. This is Kapitel Chesed of Megillah. Once Haman is dead, all you have to deal with is the aftermath of Haman. What Haman left. Haman left a decree with a royal signature, which meant that it was irrevocable. It couldn't be reversed. It could only be amended, as Achashverosh explained, as the story goes. But what Haman was thinking is immaterial. Esther comes to the king, and she wants to remove the evil that Haman did and the thoughts that he thought on the Jewish people. In other words, it would be bad enough, it said, it would be difficult, it said, Ve'es asher choshav ala Yehudim. The double expression, machshavte asher choshav. Who cares what Haman thought? Haman's gone. And particularly the double expression, machshavte asher choshav, is even more strange. Why is this necessary? And I'm asking the question because the Maamar doesn't ask the question, but I have the advantage of foresight to some degree. The Maamar answers it, so I'm telling it to you beforehand. But look how the Maamar begins. What does it mean, Esther, bow down to the king's feet? God has no feet. There is no process of bringing you into the realm of the metaphysical. He just begins the Maamar. The king is God, and the feet are the feet of God. What's meant? Lifnei Raglav, the Eibush has no feet. What does it mean, feet lamayla? Now, last week, in Parshas Mishpatim, we have a very similar allusion. For Yirotz Elokei Yisrael, that the Jewish people saw Elokei Yisrael, the God of Israel, V'tachas Raglov, Kemaisa Livnas Asapin, and beneath his feet there was Kemaisa Livnas Asapin, and of course all the Rishonim, beginning with Rashi and the Rambam and others, wonder what does it mean beneath the feet of God. First of all, what does God look like, and how could you see him? What does it mean his feet? You can look it up. So the Alter Rebbe learns the story of Esther and understands the story from the outset, without going through the various steps, that Esther is talking to Hashem and she's bowing to God to remove the evil of Haman and the evil thoughts that he thought on the Jews by falling to his feet, to the feet of God Almighty. God Almighty has no feet, and he is no body, which of course is an expression from the Pismain, from the poem Yigdal, which we do not say because it's not brought in the Kisvi Arizal, but the Rabbi oftentimes would quote parts of Tefillah which we don't incorporate into our Nusach. So the question is obvious. Why is Arachel, Esther Amalka, falling before the feet of God? God doesn't have any feet. This is the question. So the Rebbe begins to answer the question, in effect, by analyzing the word Esther. In other words, before you can deal with the feet of the king, the feet of God, you have to analyze Esther. Now, of course, Esther was a physical Jewess, a physical woman. We know that she lived physically and she did what she did and so forth and so on. But if the feet means the feet of God, Esther also means something more than the physical person Esther. It means the collective Jew, the whole of the Jewish nation, as they're called Esther. And the Rebbe analyzes the specific idea of the Jewish nation as they carry the illusion Esther. Who, in order to explain what it means, we must first explain the meaning of the word Esther, but this requires us to explain to explain the spirit, the essence of Hatfilah, of prayer. In other words, how is it possible for every person to pray before God Almighty? And the reason this is a question is the collective Jew, the entire body of Jewish souls, carries the name Esther. Now, Rabbi say, what you must understand is that Knesset Yisrael, the collective Jew, is called Schneur. In other words, Malchus of Atzilus. Malchus of Atzilus is the feminine aspect of godliness, and of course the masculine aspect of godliness is what we call Zeir Anpin, Malka Kadisha. But Knesset Yisrael is the feminine aspect, and of course the Jewish people, in as much as they are the feminine aspect, are called by the names of all the matriarchs with the exception of Leah, because Leah is Bina. In other words, it could be called Sarah, it could be called Rivka, it could be called Rachel, but it could be called Esther. Because all of the women of the Tanakh represent Malchus of Atzilus. In other words, all the women represent the same Sphira. Avraham is Chesed, Yitzchak is Gevurah, Yaakov is Teferes. They're different Sphiras. Sarah is Malchus, and Rivka is Malchus, and Rachel is Malchus. Which is why, it has in Kabbalah, we don't go into the story of their death and their burial, because once you tell the story of Sarah, Sarah's Malchus of Atzilus, Rivka's death is the same thing as Sarah's death. She's also Malchus of Atzilus. And the same is true of Rachel. Although Rachel's death is told in brief. But Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the reason each death has to be told separately, because this is the death of Chesed, this is the death of Gevurah, this is the death of Chesed. But all the matriarchs, all of the Imais are the same Sphira, which is why once the Torah talks about Sarah, there's no need to repeat it by Rivka and so forth. But the different aspects of Malchus. For example, Sarah denotes Malchus when she's in a state of dominance, in time of Geula, when she's a princess, when she's a queen, and so forth. Rachel and Esther are lower levels. Lower means to say how they were more convoluted, concealed states. Rachel is the matriarch of Golos. Rachel is not buried in the Marsa Machpelah, she's buried on the roadside, because she is the mother of Golos. She's Knesset Yisrael, the Jewish nation, as they're going over to the Golos, as is Esther. But as you'll see soon, Rachel's Golos is incomparable to Esther's. Esther means concealment, or double concealment. So the Jewish nation, as they're represented by Malchus of Atzilus, on the level of Esther, is much more concealed, is much more challenged in its ability to engage with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Knesset Yisrael also in Golos are carrying the denotation of Rachel. And he explains, Yesh Lahad B'Shem is the Shom, is on the level of Malchus, have various names. Amongst them is Rachel and Esther. And he explains, V'nikra B'Shem B'chinas Rachel, the Jewish nation is called collectively Rachel in a time of Golos. But what kind of a Golos? Shehi B'chinas is Golos. When there is some divine experience in a revealed way, touching Rachel, and accordingly, and correspondingly, and by effect, touching the Shalom Yisrael down here. In other words, even times of Golos, where we were able to sense godliness more. They were, so to speak, better times. And therefore, the Jewish nation, even as they were in a Rachel, Golos state, are able to become included in their source. In other words, they're able to return to God Almighty. As the Pasuk describes it. Rachel, like a sheep. And of course, the word Rachel, which means sheep, is the same exact as the word Rachel, which is one of our matriarchs. And as a result, they mean the same thing metaphysically. In front of those who shear her, she goes silent. And of course, the one who's shearing the Shalom Yisrael, as it's explained in this Maamar, goes on godliness. And of course, the connotation is the one who shears the wool off the sheep is going to use it for a good purpose. That's the version of it in this Maamar. Other Maamar will give you a very different version. And the Maamar is explaining, the Alter Rebbe is explaining that Rachel, the Neshama in Golos, is very happy to be used as a servant of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They're additionally called a sheep to the slaughter. In other words, a sheep that's in a state of service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sheep Peshet, it's tzavar, it's even prepared to extend its neck l'shchita, to be raised up, to be offered to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on a level of Ratz and Pashat, a transcendent will. No logical consideration. So Rachel is a Golos condition. But what kind of a Golos condition where you're just prepared for Bittul HaKadosh Baruch Hu and even Katzein Tivcha? There is an idea that the Jewish nation in Golos finds themselves on a level she'ed say that the will of a Jew is lehi batal v'lehi kol, to become batal and included. The aid is barach and the light of Ein Sof. That the oneness of the Jew should become swallowed up by the oneness of Ein Sof. As it's described in the pasuk, that the presence of God, the light of God, the glow of God, the ray of God is experienced even on earth and certainly in the heavens. And we're dealing with a Golos condition where there is enough divine revelation even on earth. Is illuminated by the presence of God's covet. As the pasuk says, the whole world is filled with His glory. That although it's bechinas espashlas v'ziv, it's only a small light or small trace of the Ein Sof. Nevertheless, this small light is enough because it's revealed that the world and everything that fills it is bottled in its source. So this is a Golos condition that's not very terribly dark. And accordingly, the Cholzman truly is Galos u'Bislavos. When the Jew finds himself in an exile, where the godliness is revealed, and with a state of passion, Nikrayim, the Jewish nation, are called collectively Bechinas Rachel, the concept of Rachel, the concept of a sheep. That's overtly bottled to Hashem, Ketein Tivcha v'chuli, as a sheep to the slaughter, because we experience the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, Rachel represents the Jewish nation going into exile, but an exile where there is still profound sense of the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So a Yid in exile, in a Rachel condition, the Alter Rebbe is not asking the question, how do you daven? Because it's self-understood. You daven because you're inspired. To the contrary, Golos is dark. But when the Golos is dark, and not so dark, in other words, you're in Golos and you know it's a Golos, the desperation to go out of that Golos and to reconnect to Hashem is very, very strong. So everybody understands how you daven. But then there is a deepening of the exile. With the Jewish nation, rather than being called Rachel, are called Esther. Dr. Aval, however, line 11. When a Jew is in exile, and the presence of God is altogether concealed, then collectively Jewish people are called Mikroim B'Shem Esther. We carry the name Esther. And what is the concept of Esther? As the pasuk says, Vanechi Haster Aster, I will hide and conceal, doubly concealed, Ponai, my face, Vayemahu, on that day. You'll see later in the Maamar that Yom means revelation, and Ahu means hiddenness. Vayemahu means that sometimes the Golos is so dark that even when God is revealed, you cannot see it. So Esther represents Yidden in a state of Golos, where they don't experience godliness at all. Says the Rebbe, it's wrong as people think. That someone who doesn't experience godliness in a revealed way, they lack the revelation of godliness altogether. They lack a connection to God altogether. Says the Rebbe, this is not true. Every person has an innate connection and sense of godliness. However, it's totally concealed. And it must be revealed from its hiddenness and concealment. And this is why the Alter Rebbe says, how do you daven? And of course, the meaning of the question is not how do we recite the words. How do I engage in Avodah Shabbalef? How do I spiritually tune in and attach with HaKadosh Baruch Hu if Hashem has hidden Himself from me so totally that I'm completely desensitized to my own godly inner spark, beyond the level of Rachel, to the degree of Esther? How was he supposed to daven under those conditions? This concealment is like the rose amongst thorns. So the thorns represent what's good. Right? The beginning of the Zayah talks about, the rose represents what's good. The rose goes on the Yedil Min Sarachim, the 13 petals, like it says in the beginning of Zayah. But you have the thorns, and the thorns, they hold back and they block the rose. And of course, you also puncture holes in the rose, and that produces the favorable reach. In other words, when the galus gets even worse, it reveals the Yiddish neshama. But still, it covers over totally. The whole and the matters of the physical world, and the behavior in this world, as we live them, which is done with all of our passion. In other words, we don't just engage in materialism, but we really get a kick out of it. We enjoy it very much. They are the thorns that are mastidim b'chinazum galus, to prevent the aspect of zu from coming into a state of gili. I'm not sure if this is precise, but twice the Alter Rebbe uses the word zeh and zu. Zeh means this, but zeh can also mean revelation. Umastidim b'chinazu, the level of revelation from being revealed. And when a Yid finds himself in a state of galus, on the level called Esther, he masuteres. The godly revelation is also concealed. And that's the meaning of the words, Bayoimahu. Bayoim means Gilui, and the Gilui is also covered up. And later on in the Maamar, I don't want to give the Maamar away, but on line 51, you'll see it when we get to it, Mitzvah Hashem. To take a quick peek. I've never done this before, but he says, there could be a revelation of darkness. It's not day, it's night, which means to say you could be in the light, and as far as you're concerned, it's darkness, which is in a way worse than darkness, because when you're in dark, you're in darkness. When you experience the light, it's good. When you have light and you think it's dark, that's the worst kind of confusion. So every Yid has Bayim, but it's Hahu, it's concealed. But the point is back to line 17, Astir upon Bayimahu, God Almighty says, I'm going to hide my face, and he finishes with Haved. Think about it. Line 19. And the Alter Rebbe's question is, how was a Yid supposed to daven under those conditions? In other words, how is a Yid supposed to spiritually engage with HaKadosh Baruch Hu when he's in such a state of darkness? And the Alter Rebbe does not answer the question. He moves on. He asks the question, and in asking the question, he's articulating, he's revealing, he's expressing how challenging The halamas vestated of Golos could be, the Rebbe so often used to say, Golos Batei Golos, an exile within an exile, when Samim Cheshach La'er Ve'er La'cheshach, you call darkness light and light darkness and so forth. It's a very, very intense Golos. How was he supposed to daven under those conditions? He asks the question rhetorically, and I suppose you got to daven. You have to daven anyway. I'll tell you an interesting story, irrelevant but beautiful. In the early 70s, a lot of Anash came out of Russia. A lot of Chassidim came out of Russia. Mostly from Asia, I believe, from the Asian lands. But Lubavitcher's Babish. The Rebbe paid for them to come here for Tishrei. And the Rebbe asked that they should go as a group to meet Reb Moshe Feinstein, who was a Rav, he was a Gadol Ador. I mean, he was the Poisek of our generation, certainly in America. And he had a very warm relationship with the Rebbe. He was himself a Russian Jew. He himself witnessed Stalinism before he got here. So it was all very meaningful to him. And the Rebbe asked that they should go. And he sent along Rabbi Chadakov. And Rabbi Chadakov introduced them to Reb Moshe. And Rabbi Chadakov's introductions, he introduced each one. One of them introduced that he knows the whole Charles Chuvas Igros Moshe. A Yid in Russia was a book in Charles Chuvas Igros Moshe. The Rebbe told Rabbi Chadakov how to introduce them. It was very moving. And the Moshe was very moved. And he asked them, wie haben sich gehalten? You're talking about Chassidishe Yidden, not Stam Frum. Passionate Chassidishe Yidden living behind the Iron Curtains all these years. And he asked them how they survived. One Chassid said, Fabrengens, and the Chassid said, his Kashet was. He asked one of the younger light, how did you survive as Chassidim? And as Yidden, and he said, very simple, Abreidet man gehat. We had a choice. Abreidet man gehat. And Moshe was more impressed by this answer than by the other answers. Why? The other people gave reasons how. This guy said, what do you mean? I'm a Jew. Vosara yidavent nicht. What kind of Jew doesn't daven? I'm living in Russia, behind the Iron Curtain. And of course the biggest issue was they had no prospect of ever getting out of there. It was a dream that they would ever leave Russia. And a Yid says, how are we from? How not? The point is, you don't need a reason or a motivation to be from. You're a Yid. So I'm telling the story because it's a wonderful story. But in light of what the Rebbe said in the Maamar, how are you supposed to daven when you're in Golos of Esther? How daven? Are you just to daven? You know. I'm reminded as I speak to you of the story with the Beis Balagola, one of those famous stories, which is printed in Agdama the Pekech Yivrin, where the Alter Rebbe told a Chassid who was in his 70s already to become a Balagola, a coachman, to save one Jew. And there's a moment in the episode which I think is very, very poignant, but it's so subtle, people miss it, that he's in this kirachma, in this inn, and this very powerful representative of a poritz, of a squire, is there, a Jewish guy, very, very secular, and he's looking for a coachman to take him to the next town, and he says to him, when are you going to be ready? So Rabbi Yossi says, noch ein davening, after davening. So he snaps. The Rabbi says, I'm not interested in your davening. Tell me what time you're leaving. I just need enough time to take a shower and eat breakfast. So Rabbi Yossi Balagola says to this completely secular Jew, then, what kind of Jew doesn't need to daven? I believe that question is the trigger. The rest of the story is that he woke up in the middle of the night, and Rabbi Yossi was saying Tikkun Chatzos. But I believe that this line, that a Chassidishe Yid looks at a powerful and rich secular Jew, and he's not intimidated by him, and in no way feels less of a person. This guy's a macher, and he's powerful, and so forth. And I'm a Schneur, a Rabbi, a Balagola. Rabbi Yosef doesn't see that at all. He looks at a Jew and says, you're a Jew, how could you not daven? And I really believe that that's the beginning of the story, how it wakes him up to tshuva. So the answer to the question here is, how are you supposed to daven? A Yid's got to daven. But Alter Rebbe is asking the question, when you find yourself in a Golos of Esther, where it's not only Golos, but there's no Gili whatsoever, how are you supposed to be moved to daven? And the answer is, you got to daven. Alter Rebbe, as far as I know, doesn't answer the question. Now goes the Maamar, 9:19. And as I told you earlier, the Maamar speaks about four things. There's Yom Hazeh, this day, Yom Hahu, that day. There's Laila Hazeh, this night, and there's Laila Hahu, that night. To save you the intrigue and the drama, Yoim means gilui. Yoim means revelation. Like there's a chumash where you can look him lo oir yoim, light is day. Zeh means gilui. Zeh, marabetz ba'ibem zeh. You point with your finger and you say zeh. This means gilui. Laila means darkness, concealment, golos. Who, which means that one or him, also means darkness because it's in third person, it's indirect, and who denotes something which is far away. You have it in the Maamar Vatosef where they explain a similar idea. Zeh and Sham, here it's Zeh and who. So Yoim means day and Zeh means revealed. So Yoim Hazeh is the ultimate revelation. Laila Hahu, like Balayla Hahu, another Dashnas HaMelech in the Megillah, is the epitome of darkness. It's night and it's a dark night. Yeah. But in between, you have two confused states. You have Yom Hahu and Laila Hazeh. Yom Hahu means it's day and you think it's night because you're confused. Laila Hazeh goes on the night of Pesach. Leil Shimurim, it's night. But in the night, there's a revelation of the Eibishter. And of course, that's the story of Purim. Laila Hahu is not transformed into Yom, is transformed into Laila Hazeh. Where even though it's dark at night, you can experience the Eibishter's presence. And that's what the Rebbe is now going to explain. So I've given it to you briefly. Now let's learn it inside. Line 19. There's a level called that day. There's a level called this day. There's a level called that night. Which is Nikra Balayla Hazeh, and there's an aspect which is called this night. And as I told you earlier, this day is the greatest revelation. That night is the greatest concealment. This night is revelation in darkness, and that day means even though the light is shining, you're in darkness. And the Rebbe explains each of the four, but he doesn't really explain all four. He explains one more than the rest, and some he doesn't explain altogether. In Eksiv, we have an idea of Zeh Hayim, this day God Almighty created. Nagil and Ismechavais, they have great gladness and joy. That's Zeh Hayim. God Almighty saves the Jewish people on that day. This night is the night of guardianship. It goes on the night of Pesach. The king's sleep was stirred in the story of Esther on that night. So you see psukim to represent each of these four. In other words, it's not just a philosophical division, it's like a biblical division. We find four psukim that use each one of these four expressions. And the Rebbe begins to explain them one at a time. The word zeh, which means this, is direct. Like we find in the pasuk because of zeh, this Keli, my God, that I will beautify him. And of course it says in Chazal that the they pointed up at the Eibush, they said zeh, the little children who were spared in Mitzrayim recognized the Eibush, and they said zeh, this is our God. They pointed with their finger. This is galos, this is the way God is fully revealed. Like for example, a physical king, Asher Kol, Medinas Malchusay, all the nations of his kingship, experience a bittul to their master, because they physically see him. I'm on line 24. And what does it mean spiritually? There should be a revelation of godliness, which is equal to so you can see him physically. And as a consequence, that when God is fully revealed, what is the world? Ka'ayin, like nothing, against the Eibush. In other words, when godliness is revealed, you have, as Chassidus calls it, Yesh HaMiti is the Eibush, and the world in the presence of the Eibush is I. Aside. Now the next few lines are a Maamar Amuzgid, they're an aside. Even though there's no bracket, the parenthesis, but it's an aside. Umashin is Ba'im. The fact that in other places in Chassidus, it says exactly the opposite. That the world is Yesh and godliness is Ayin. Yesh, the world is called the reality, and it comes from an Ayin, which means from an I don't know, from an insignificant point. The answer is because those Maimarim in those Maimarim are describing reality in the form and perception of man. In other words, Shalei knew that in our eyes, Hagashmis, at sea, only physicality. We don't see godliness, we see Yeshus. And therefore, thus godliness is not or insignificant. The Gemara tells us Rabbi Yechon is laying on his deathbed, and his Talmidim say, give us a broch. And he tells them, Shemeir, Shamayim Aleichem, they should have a fear of heaven. Kemeir, Abasav Adam is a fear of man, and of course they were insulted by this broch. Fear God like you fear man? That seems like a very low level of fear. And Rabbi Yechon tells them, Halavai. Because in the reality as we see it, we don't see God. We see, like the Midrash Rav used to say, the Yetzer Hara is in the streets. And the Gan Eden and Gehenim are in books. Put the Gan Eden and Gehenim in front of people's eyes. And the Yetzer Hara is tape in books to see how people behave. But in this world, the world is reality. Ad kan maimer amud. This is the end of the parenthesis. But the truth is that the Eibishter is real and the world isn't. And when godliness is revealed, that's your perception. God is real. V'zehu b'chinas zeh hayom v'chulu. Zeh hayom, like it happened by Yossi. When the Eibishter split the sea and Jewish people saw godliness obviously and overtly and directly, and said, Zeh keli vanveyu. Zeh hayom means how godliness is fully revealed directly to us. That's the first concept. Zeh hayom. We're on line 28. As opposed to the notion of night. That night in metaphysics means darkness and double darkness. In other words, we cannot see anything. And of course we don't mean physically, we mean spiritually. One may know intellectually. Godliness, and of course the fancy languages. God exists. And when one's soul has gone away, when a person loses their spiritual sensitivity, the mind is not experiencing the sensitivity of godliness, simply intellectually knows that God is, that's a condition of darkness, what you call in Chassidus, mitzias sheba mitzias, God is, but you only know the existence, the proof of God. Having proof of God is in no way being intimate with God. You have to sense God. We call those the mahus. And you have the mahus of the mitzias of the mahus of the mahus. But when you know God, you have, so to speak, proof for God. But you're out in the cold, so that proof for God does not move you. That's called Laila, darkness. And of course, the most extreme case of darkness would be Laila Hahu, the opposite of Yom Hazeh. It's dark and doubly dark. We have no sensitivity to the Eibishter whatsoever. But in between those two extremes, the first extreme being Yom Hazeh, which we did from line 22 until line 28, and the second extreme would be from line 28 to line 30, which is Laila, and maybe I'm embellishing a bit, Laila Hahu. But in between those two conditions, you have the two middle conditions. And he continues now on line 30. However, even if that is such a condition of darkness, it's possible that even in the darkness you should have a sense of godliness. In other words, halayla, this night, in other words, that although it's dark, in the darkness, God is available directly. In other words, you don't have full revelation of godliness, which is called mahus. You have only the metzias of elikus, but you have what we would call in our culture the mahus of the metzias. The awareness of God is moving. So it's only an awareness, an intellectual awareness, not an intimate awareness, but it's a moving awareness, and therefore it's a revelation in darkness. And he explains, the psukim tell us, the earth is filled with the glory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is only a ray. And for those who know the intimate language of Chassidus, this means mamalakala. The pasuk says, I fill heaven and earth equally. I, Mole, fill, which goes on save of Kalalman. In other words, there's revelations of godliness that are limited to our perception. The revelations of godliness which are infinite and beyond our perception. And both are true, that God is revealed, both on a level of Mamala, which means godliness which is made available to us, both on a level of Sefer, which is the infinity of godliness. In fact, he fills heaven and earth on a level of Ani, and he fills earth on a level of Kvede. Nevertheless, but to us it's darkness. God is always available. Even in the times of Galus, we're experiencing darkness. And the lesser level, the level of Mamala Kalaman, the glory of Hashem fills the world. And he explained, so this is the ray of godliness, his barach. Line 34. To enliven the world. In other words, it's like an neshama. The ani, the Sev of Kalaman, creates us. The kvei, the Malach Kalaman, gives us life, and we should be experiencing this. And ideally, it's bechinas tfisa museges. We should be able to relate to, grasp, and access the godliness which gives us life. To become bottle and to be included and recognize priorities. God is what matters, and we don't matter much. Says the Alter Rebbe, you can even have this experience in Golus. In Golus, you may not be able to know the Ani, but the Kvoide, the Malaklam, you can know a little bit. It's dark. In other words, to experience the Mahus of this is impossible, but it's possible to know God in such a way without actually experiencing His essence, and nevertheless you're moved by the awareness that He exists. In other words, that although it's dark, in the darkness you sense God in such a way that it moves you. What does it mean practically? It says the Alter Rebbe, Machmas Gedel Emunah. In Golus, you're not going to be spiritually sensitive, but you could be aware of God in such a real way because the Emunah has power. In other words, a person believes the full faith. That is pure and refined, it's mamash as though you see. Emunah is called katnas. It's not sophisticated. It's not full, but emunah is powerful. And sometimes you have pathetic emunah, like the person who believes in God and he prays that God should help him kill and steal. And sometimes you have powerful emunah that because of your emunah you can't daven, but you daven that you should daven. The halavai b'kedesh chadisicha type of an idea. This is called laila hazeh, that although it's darkness, you're experiencing godliness. However, line 37 now, sorich lazeh, if a person wishes that in the darkness, in the golus, they should have the kind of idea samatzias, the kind of awareness of Hashem which is moving, you need to have the chinas chayim levein, bricks and mortar. And of course, chayim levein means bricks and mortar. But the Zayar explains chayim do kal v'chayim, and leveinim do libun hilchasa, which means yigiyah b'teira, that you're harder than teira. And of course, lower than yigiyah b'teira, you have amal sicha, yigiyah and tefillah. And lower than amal sicha, you have amal malacha, which is yigiyah and avidas habirudim. In the times of Golus, you got to struggle. But when a person struggles in the times of Golus, they can have laila hazeh. And T'moy Shai Ben Mitzrayim to do Shana there was for 210 years in Egypt. And they worked physically with mortar and brick. But accordingly, there was also the spiritual parallel of this. And so nowadays in Golus we also have b'chemed, da kal v'chemed, u'bulvein da liben hilchaseh, u'chol aveda basada da brais. In other words, he quotes the Zayar that says that even in Golus, where it's darkness, you have to struggle taka to understand the Torah. But when one succeeds in understanding Torah, even in Golus, you have an enlightenment without an enlightenment. You're not actually experiencing a light, but your emunah is enriched. And that's called laila hazeh, pardon me. It's night, but there's the experience of godliness. And to be sure, when a person fully accepts the yoke of Torah, even in his Zman HaGolus, the yoke of Parnas is removed from him. In other words, the Alter Rebbe is saying that the idea of Malach Techanas, idea Chanin, which is what we call Torah Or, is possible and realistic even in Zman HaGolus. If a person throws off the yoke of Torah, particularly in Golus, then you're burdened by Parnas. But even the Jews involved in Parnasa, nevertheless, he's involved in Parnasa. So therefore his Golus is dark, but it doesn't have to be so dark. He should have no sensitivity to godliness. In his darkness he finds God also. And he brings a medrash and a pshetl. Frankly, I'm not sure what the teretz is so good, but let's learn it together. In the Purim story, when the Jewish children stay up that fateful night, Mordechai gathers the kinderlach together and they study Torah. And of course, Fartog, early in the morning, Haman comes, and Mordechai is thinking he's coming to kill him, when in fact he's coming to put him on the horse. That night, the children stayed up all night. Achashverosh was the only one who was sleeping, right? The Yidden were learning, Haman was building gallows. and the Eibishter stirs Achashvedish's sleep, doesn't let him sleep. So the Chazal tell us the Eibishter stirred Achashvedish's sleep because the Yiddish Kinderlach stirred God Almighty's sleep. Alaylu Nadashas HaMelech, Malkei Shalela. And the Chazal tell us that Hashem, so to speak, wakes up in Golus, and he says, Makil Gadya, I hear the voice of Shepselach, of goats, of Yiddish Kinderlach. What they call Tzein Kachim, holy sheep, Yiddish Kinderlach. It will be called Hevel Shem Bechet, yeah? Heim Shu Kel B'nei Yisrael. The Malachim tell us the voice of the Jewish people. So the question becomes, God doesn't know, you got to tell him. And again, I'm not sure exactly what the answer is. But the question has two parts. Why does God ask what's the sound? And what kind of answer is goats? The sound. What kind of question? The sound of goats. Why would God think it's goats? Why does Hashem have to ask? He knows everything. And specifically, why is he identify the Jewish people as goats? The teretz is a young goat that cries for its mother. The goat doesn't even know why and what makes this goat its mother, but it just has an innate super rational sense that this is my source and this is where I'm going to get my nourishment and my protection. The Jewish nation, particularly the Jewish children, cried out to God, is not fully understanding how God is their father and how God is going to protect them. Because they were such a terrible tzara. Till he had cried out to the Eibishter and said, in effect, I know you're my mother. I know you're my father. I know you nourish me. I know you protect me, although I have no idea how. As the Pasuk describes in the narrowness. A Jew cries out to God. And of course the point is, he doesn't only cry out to God, but he cries out from the God within himself. That although he doesn't understand how the Eibishter is his protectorate, because there's such a love is vestated, he knows it innately. The Malachim explain, hey, the Malachim answer, that is a cry of goats. What they're saying in response is that yes, you're hearing the Jewish people cry, but the nature of the cry is like an animal. They themselves have no sense, no comprehension, no in-tuneness to understand that God is their father as a human child, knows its parent, but like an animal. Without any awareness, and is beyond reason altogether. And he explains, you cannot compare the cry of a human being to the cry of an animal. She das, it lacks mind. It's less than das. But in metaphysics, when you describe the Jewish people as a behemoth, it means since the Jewish people at that point are relating to godliness at a level which is higher than reason, accordingly, the nature of their cry was also blidas, the cry of an animal. In other words, when Yidden are in a state of tzaddik, and God is in a state of zehayoyim, it's a reasonable world. You talk to God, the child to a father. But when you have a laila hahu, a terrible darkness, the Jewish people cry out in the darkness like an animal because they have no sense of how God is their master, and they reach higher than Adam, higher than reason, and God responds, and that's the question. How are Yidden crying on a super rational level? And the answer is they're goats. They don't understand, but they're crying. They know that God is their master without knowing why. The Jewish nation like animals with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When Yidden are like animals, that's when they're closest to the Eibishter. Like it says in Tanya chapter 18, and take a look also in Tanya Sof Peirik Mem Vov. At the times of Golus we're like animals, but in our animal state we're connecting to the truth of the Eibishter, if you will, the Behema Rabba, which is higher than Ishtalshat. Vehavei. So when you're in darkness, you're like an animal and you cry out to God like an animal. It says the Rebbe Vehine, Kasher Tzak Liba Malavaya. When a Jew is in such a golus, where he has no sense intellectually and intimately of God's presence, but he has an innate animal sense, this is my father, and the cry from this narrowness comes from the animal level within themselves. As a result, that the emunah should be enriched and alive. That although it's night, that in the darkness they have a sense of godliness without understanding why. Like sheep to the slaughter, not like human beings, but like animals to the slaughter. This is called Laila Hazeh. Although it's dark, the Emunah has been strengthened. Says the Rebbe, that's the miracle of Purim. Now what's he saying? The miracle of Purim began with the strengthening of Jewish faith. That's the source, the core of the miracle was that Mordechai, he didn't make the night into day. He made the night light. Shubachin is Bovel. Darkness is Bovel. Everything is confused and entangled in its darkness. And in this darkness, the Jewish people found themselves. And by the Jewish people finding themselves, their own godliness, in this darkness, they were able to cry out to the Eibishter from the darkness. And Hashem responds on a level which is higher than reason. So we explained Zeh HaYoim. We explained the Laila Hahu. And we just explained the Laila Zeh. But there's a fourth condition. There could also be Bayem Hu. It's Bayem, it's a revelation. Hahu, and it's dark. Now I have to be honest. I looked up the Shadayeda. If you look at the back of the Torah, there is a page of Ha'aras V'Tiyuna from the Rebbe, from our Rebbe, where he tells you which Maimarim are based on the Maimarim of the Alter Rebbe. And on this Maimon is Mitzayin to Shadayeda of Yevilu V'Shmalchos Perek Yud and Perek Samach Vav. And I looked through it. He didn't, if I recall correctly, explain this pasuk L'Yem V'Layla Eis Erev Yihi Yo'er, but he explained by Yem Hahu. And what he explained there was that by Yem Hahu means an unbelievably great revelation of godliness. It's such a high revelation that to you it's dark. In other words, the simple meaning of Bayem Hahu is that even though God is shining, you don't get it, which is spiritually the worst condition. It's in terms of the state of the person not as bad as Laila Hahu, but when God is shining to you and you don't get him, you're in pretty bad shape, so to speak. He explains Yoim Hahu means that the revelation is so high that we don't get it now, only to get it after Mashiach comes. And it's not really a conflict because Yoim Hahu means Hashem is giving us such a high revelation. Why is he giving us such a high revelation? Because he can't give us a lower one. He can't give us revelation which we can internalize. But be that as it may, and what I'm really trying to say in other words is what Yoim Hahu means is not really explained here. And in the Shari Ede, he doesn't explain it as a negative thing, he explains it only as a positive thing. So if I had to summarize, Yom Hazeh was explained very well. Laila Hahu was also explained, if you will, pretty good, Bavla, within the framework of the discussion. And Laila Hazeh was also explained very well. Yom Hahu was the one which is explained the least. You're living in a good time. God is revealed and you're tuned out. You're just not there. Now that the Rebbe explained to us these four conditions of Yom Hazeh and Yom Hahu, Laila Hahu and Laila Hazeh, he returns to the original Maamar. V'hine. Yidden are in a state of Esther. Esther means that it's not only Golos, it's a deep Golos. How deep is the Golos? It's not Laila Hazeh, it's Laila Hahu and Yom Hahu. And the question becomes, how do you daven? It's a very, very big hell of a Esther. How do you daven? How do you find God in such a terribly difficult situation? And in the story of Purim, it was Laila Hahu, Yom Hahu, and they managed to find God. So the Rebbe said this is accomplished by acknowledging who your real enemy is. And your real enemy is not materialism, although materialism burdens us. Your real enemy is not lust, although lust burdens us. Your real enemy isn't even doubt, although doubt is a terrible spiritual condition to be in. Your real enemy is Amalek. And what's Amalek, as the Maamar is going to explain momentarily, an evil that does not even pretend to have any leg to stand on. He's just a scoffer for no reason. So we're on line 53, please. Behine. Bechinas Amalek. At the heart of the Purim story is the character of Amalek. Haman is the embodiment of Amalek. And when you ask the question, how do you find tefillah in Esther, in the deepest darkness? How the Jewish people find themselves in that world and arouse themselves to go from Laila HaHu to Laila Hazeh. The beginning of it is they need to constantly engage in fighting with Amalek as the battle of God Almighty Himself. And he explains, all the nations of the world, they represent various klipas. This rise in various negative attributes. Like it says in the Pasuk Achiti, it says in the Maamar of what is it? No? About Midian, it's very similar to Amalek. You can deal with the Sheva Amamin, but not with a Midian, not with an Amalek. Why? Because you can fight with an enemy that pretends to be justified if a nation is kind. But kind to the point of permissiveness. People can do whatever they want. So kindness is a good thing, permissiveness is a bad thing. But they're pretending to be a good people. So you can be mavada the goodness and therefore correct or refine their kindness. If a nation is principled, well, with principled nations, they become cruel. Cruelty is bad, principle is good. But when a person does not even pretend to have a merit, just evil, Amalek, says the Rebbe, these various klipas by themselves, would become bottled to kedusha. It's said to you before, lust, materialism, even doubt by itself can be bittul to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Moreover, when it will be given to kedusha, you will have a very special level of connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu because of the advantage of light that comes after darkness. If it not lift them, it's relatively speaking easy to deal with them. However, behind all these klipas, you have the chutzpah v'agasas shall kol midara, the chutzpah, the arrogance, and the disrespect, the chutzpah. I guess the translation of chutzpah is chutzpah. At this point, it's in the dictionary. V'agasas and the arrogance shall kol midara, hidden behind every evil midah. Hu b'chinas Amalek. It's not the midah itself; it's the chutzpah of the midah. And that's very difficult to deal with, because when somebody is evil, without a pretense, to use fancy language, there's no means by which we mavad him. How are you supposed to fix that? There's nothing to fix, he's just evil. And this is it's the war that goes on till Mashiach comes. Because the person whose leg that he stands on, his chutzpah, is malchusa b'leitaga, kingship without a crown. All the remaining midas, they have a connection to this, to guf, to the body, which goes on atzilus. They're the skin of the snake, but they're the skin, they're the klipa of kedush. Therefore, there can be creation or correction in each. As opposed to ha-chutzpah v'agasas, chutzpah and arrogance. Me'ayin hu b'olachol echad ve'echad, as it comes into every midah, is very difficult to be mavad. Why? Because you're fighting with nothing. Says the Rebbe, hu masha kosov machshavas homan hashachisha v'hayudim. This is what Esther. Esther represents Yidden in the darkest galus. But there's no Laila Hazeh, darkness. They know God and it doesn't move them at all. And she wants to connect. And she identifies that the source of her evil is not the darkness, it's the machshavas homan. It's the klipa of mocking and laughing and scoffing. I want you to know, the famous story that they tell. It could have happened also, but it certainly told more than the story occurred about this woman, this Jewish woman gets on a train and she sees a chassid with a beard and payas and a big beaver hat, and she starts to lecture him that you're an embarrassment to Jews, you're an embarrassment to the world. Why do you have to be different? Why do you have to dress like they dressed 200 years ago? What's wrong with being in the modern world? And she screams and carries on and on and on and on like only a Jew can. And when she stops to catch her breath, the man says to her, "I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry, woman. I'm Amish. I'm not a Jew. I'm Amish." Oh, what a beautiful culture! I respect people who hold on to their tradition. You've heard that before, yeah? That's very difficult to deal with because it's not reasonable. And I want you to know something. That you have the famous word, which I believe goes back to the Alter Rebbe. That the Ish Moshe Onav Meid Mekol Ha'od Mashaf Nedam. It's like I brought Maamar Vatosef Esther, Maamar Vatosef Esther. That Moshe Rabbeinu was humbled, Mekol Ha'od Mashaf Nedam, from all people on the face of the earth. So it says in Svarim, it says in Chassidishe, and this means that Moshe saw all the future generations, and he was most humbled by Dora, the Ikvis of the Mashiach, our generation. Because our challenges are so great that even Moshe couldn't fathom them. Now, what are our challenges? So in the bottom of the previous Rebbe, when he brings this Maimed, this thought from the Rebbe Nishma Seiden, I believe it's in Vatosef Esther, Ayin Tes, he says, Mesiras Nefesh, the Russian Golos. When our Rebbe brings it, he says it's the Al Yevesh Rapnei Amaligim. One of the greatest tests we encounter and face in our lives is people who mock. And I hate to tell you, the scoffers and the mockers are not the people you meet on the train and in the business offices. They're the person sitting next to you in shul, and your neighbor, and your children's classmates, who mock being ehrlich, and being frum, and being sincere. And it's a very difficult test, because it's very difficult to react to a mocker. A heretic, a screamer and a shouter, a principle, conscientious objector you can deal with, but a mocker. And the Yidden, Esther, sees machsheves Haman asher choshav. It's the ploy, it's the scheme, it's the sinister evil of Haman to get into the Jewish head, not with doubt, but with a mockery which creates and is the source of the doubt. And Esther says, how is the Jew supposed to daven under those conditions? You have to kill Haman. You have to kill him. And the solution to Haman. And the question is, how is Esther supposed to daven in Golos? Is Vatipul Lefnei Nagav. She falls before the feet of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And of course, the Mayim started with the question, what does it mean, the feet of God? And he answers, it goes on the angels on the Kroim, B'Shem Ragel, which are called the divine feet. Now, of course, you know, in other Maimarim, in Aglea Yerdis Mais, that the feet goes on Malchus of Atzilus. Here it goes on the Malach. Which goes, the Pasuk says, Seif, Mimal Kroshim. In other words, the Malachim are above the Kroshim, but the feet of HaKadosh Baruch. And the idea of Vatipul Lefnei Raglav is, I guess it means that she needs the Malachim in order to have a connection to HaKadosh Baruch. This is the Pshat and the Pasuk Vatei Fates Chanin, she cries and she pleads. Lahavet, to take away Machshov, the thoughts of laughing and mocking and belittling sincerity and emes. And when she falls before the feet, before the Malachim, she draws strength to deal with this. Okay, so now the Maimer leaves us with so many questions. So what does it mean? What does it mean I'm going to fall before the Malach? Now, frankly, I don't know. I don't know what this means. You can explain it in many, many ways. I'm just going to make a simple suggestion. And that is that we read that the Malachim's service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu was very, very passionate. In the Siddur, in the Birchas Kishma. And the passion is because they're very far away. Malachim who are closer are quieter. The passion shows in a distance. And perhaps what he's saying is that Esther learns how to daven in the deepest times of Golos by falling before the feet of the Malachim to imitate their passion, their demonstrative passion for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which really shows in a distance from the Eibishter. But that passion creates somewhat of a connection. But I don't know. I really don't know for sure. What we do understand is that Esther falls before the feet of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which means she needs the Malachim's help to take herself out of her darkness of Balayla Hahu, and she identifies the true enemy. The true enemy is not Roas Haman, it's Machsheves Haman. And of course the end of it is you hang Haman and the sons on the tree. Which is 50 cubits high. In other words, the koyach to defeat Haman comes from Chamisha Mama, higher than Seder Ishtalshalos, goes only from higher than Seder Ishtalshalos. Can you destroy Klipas Amalek? In other words, only from higher than Seder Ishtalshalos can Esther daven even as mana goes. The Eibishter as a melech employs a garment of gaiva and a garment of makifim, which is the only way we're able to deal with the Klip of Amalek and Golos and gain some kind of inspiration for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I guess in our world, and in our form, and in our language, this means we have to daven. Connect to Hashem spiritually. In order to daven, you have to be sincere. You have to be moved. For many of us, sincerity is hard, and being emotionally moved in the direction of the Eibishter is harder still. So we have to identify the real cause of our hardship. The real cause of our hardship is not temptation and materialism and parnasa and distractions. Those things are also, but they're symptoms. The real cause, that underneath it all, there is the worst Yetzer Hara of all. That it's a joke. We have to kill that. And if we can successfully kill that, the burden of our material lives, and for those who are blessed, thank God, we don't have for shalom, the Rebbe told, our Rebbe told the Kapishnitz, if you didn't have to suffer, let them suffer with too much gashmias. And this can't to put him, as we all know, put him Tashin Tezvav, that Yidden should be blessed by gashmias. But we have to kill the Amalek. You have to kill the scoffer, kill the cynic, kill the smart guy, kill the smart aleck, because that's an evil that has no redemption. There's nothing good about it. And I want to finish with a story, as I started, and I believe I've told you the story before, but it's okay to repeat. Also the Mittler Rebbe. The Mittler Rebbe traveled once, and it came Purim, and there were several choices for a Balkiya who would read the Megillah. Amongst them was a Malamed, who had been a Chassid of the Alter Rebbe. Malamedim were the most Chassidish Yidden and the most impoverished. And the Mittler Rebbe asked this Malamed, who was a very Chassidish Yid, should read the Megillah. And he came to one of the most significant moments in the Megillah, where Haman comes early in the morning to see Achashverosh and to gain permission to hang Mordechai al Ha'etz. And the king invites him in and asks him, what should be done to a man that the king wishes to honor? So Haman says, Haman says, believe in the same scoffing heart that our Maamar was about, who would the king want to honor more than I? And of course we all know the rest of the story. He lays it on heavy, and everything he says turns out to be Mordechai. So when this Malamed read this pasuk, who would the king wish to honor more than myself, he couldn't contain himself, and he shouted, Feh, klipe, Feh, evil. And he continued reading the Megillah. Now the Mittler Rebbe was a Rebbe who didn't tolerate these kind of emotional outbursts. And the Chassidim were all sure that the next day he would choose a different Balkiya, because a Chassid should lose himself like this. Anyway, the next day comes Shachris, and people are wondering who the Mittler Rebbe is going to send over to the Megillah reading, and he sent the same Malamed, which was out of character. And he read it. I'm sure that the second time around he contained himself, so to speak, and people wondered why the Mittler Rebbe did not object to his display of emotion. As it happened, they finished davening, and the Mittler Rebbe made an announcement of give him Megillah Geld. There's a custom that when you have a Balkriya, you're supposed to pay him, you're supposed to give him money. And you put down a gold in it, a gold coin, which is an awful lot of money. Say $1,000, a gold, an outrageous amount of money. There were 100 Gvidim, 100 wealthy Chassidim present, and as the Mittler Rebbe put down a gold in a rendel, they each had to put down a gold in a rendel, and in one day the man became wealthy. And the Mittler Rebbe said that this Malamed Shutaka had not have read the Megillah because of his spoilers. But he had a bracha from my father for Ashidis, from Alter Rebbe for wealth. For a bracha for Ashidis, he got to make a keli. The poor Malamed was not making a keli. I want you to know, somebody once asked our Rebbe, how could a Malamed make a keli for Ashidis? He had to buy a lottery ticket. The Rabbeim were into lotteries, they really were. They weren't into buying 400 tickets a week, but one lottery ticket they bought. So the Mittler Rebbe said, I wanted my father's bracha not to go to waste. So I let him read, in spite of his spoilers, and we shall the sash. A little early, but a